clear. It says the government will contribute so much in taxation for a water project in Kitui. And the funding of the balance that it cannot, which you call the deficit, will be raised, let's say, from Bank of India, Exim Bank India, of so much amount of money. It is put there, right? And that becomes an appropriation. And an exchequer issue is given to the Ministry of Water on the basis of that, right? So that is how the government finances its development.
Okay.
Right? Now,
So
anything aside of that, that is not in appropriations development, is not money that is used for development, because what was passed?
I'm almost hearing you say, Jimmy, and maybe you can just say it clearly, is that an illegality has happened over and over again. That money has been borrowed
Absolutely.
outside of the boundaries that have been set.
Absolutely.
So this money that was then borrowed, because it was not being borrowed for the purposes of development, because if it was, it would be in the bill.
Yes.
And because it was not being borrowed for that,
Yes.
then an illegality has occurred many times over.
Absolutely. And when an illegality has occurred many times over, you cannot come to the sovereign and tell us we are responsible for it. You cannot. Those who did that illegality are responsible for it, not us.
Okay.
Now,
So
yes.
you're basing this on two. So there's the appropriations laws for every budget cycle,
Yes.
and then you're looking at the treasury returns on debt. And
Not
you're
to the
saying-
treasury. The account of the government is in the central bank.
Yes, on debt.
And the central bank, it's like your own bank account, is in ABSA or whichever other bank you go to. It is there, equity and so on. Correct?
it shows you.
So the
This is the
bank of
amount.
government, our account, because we are the sovereign, is in central bank. And the central bank statements are showing that over the last 9 years, 4 trillion, in fact, 4.3 trillion was borrowed above what was passed by Parliament. Are we on the same page?
So I want to ask the question there. In this debt account, is it showing just the principal borrowed, or is it principal plus interest?
Plus interest. Everything is
But
there.
in Parliament, what has been
Just
passed,
like your own account, if you take a loan,
what Parliament passes is not plus interest.
no,
It
no,
is the
no,
principal.
it is. Oh, now I'll come to that.
Because I want to, for example, look at one budget. Let's say last year's budget, 3.2 trillion shillings is
Borrowed.
is what we are saying we are going to spend in the next financial year. And in that, we are going to finance it this way. 2.4 trillion shillings will come from revenue collection in taxes, and then the balance 800 billion shillings we are going to borrow. Parliament approves that. So that goes as 800 billion shillings being borrowed, and that's what you are accumulating to 2 trillion over the last 8 years.
Yes.
You see, that 800 billion is the amount being borrowed, not the interest.
Now, the interest is covered in repayments.
Yes.
And repayments are covered in what you call the recurrent appropriations bill.
Okay.
All right? So Parliament also approves the repayments of our debt. And interest is covered there. And I don't want to go there right yet, but I'm coming there.
Okay.
Because that is also another story
Okay.
in itself.
Can I ask a question before we get there? Okay. If all these things are passed here and passed there and structured here and it's a straight line, and we know what we borrowed, we know the amounts, we know the interest, well ahead of time, what is the required government process of ensuring that these debts are paid? Do we wait until due date to start scrambling to look for money to pay? Or is there a way in which, as government receives money, you appropriate money for that debt, so that come the day the money is actually there, so the government can pay?
Now, you see, you're moving me faster than I wanted.
Oh,
Because
okay.
now you're moving me to the appropriations recurrent.
Sorry.
where all debt payments
Where
are
should I
done.
move you to first?
Now, I want us to finish
Yes.
with this aspect. Are we clear that we can only borrow for development? City. Are we clear that that is our law?
That particular part
And
of the
I think we
syllabus
got to
we've
also be
understood.
very clear
Yes.
that we have borrowed in excess of 4 trillion above what we have passed in law.
That one I got.
Now, let me develop this.
Okay.
I want you to take your pen again. City.
Which one? I have 3. Should I take the red one?
Take the red one. Aya.
Things are thick.
Things
Yeah,
are
give me the red
completely
one now.
monumentally thick.
The government of Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta inherited a debt of 2 trillion from the
Kibaki.
previous government. So
Yes.
put that 2 trillion was Kibaki's debt.
Okay.
Parliament passed 2 trillion for borrowing under the Uhuru government. Right?
Yes.
In fact, I think it's 2.3. So call it 4.3, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Higher. The accounts of government show that they borrowed 6.3. Right? So in excess of 4. So for argument's sake, let us even remove the aspect of illegality. Right? So take the 6.3 trillion, add Kibaki's debt of 2, you get to
8
0.3.
trillion.
In fact, that as of March last year, when we did this audit, was what was showing in our central bank account as outstanding.
8.3.
8.3. A little over that, but 8.3. Higher. So let's now go to where you want me to go. Our repayments of debt, including the interest Eric is talking about, CT, are in what is called the Appropriations Recurrent Act.
Yes.
Over the last 9 years, a total of 5.6 trillion shillings has been authorized and has been paid to our debts.
Over the last
9 years.
5 point?
5.6.
Okay.
And
And
this is
this-
in the public domain.
It is in public record. We have taken this audit from nothing else other than public records.
I see.
So CT and maybe Eric, because you're the ones who raised this question, tell me why is that 5.6 not reflected in the central bank account?
Of money having gone out.
Because it was paid.
Yeah, but
So how are we still owing 8.3, 8.4?
I'd like to ask, this one now, forgive, my brain moves a little slowly.
Okay.
When we're dealing with money. Yes. If it's my own, it moves fast, but when someone else's,
That's a good one.
this 5.6 trillion
Yes.
that we paid,
Yes.
when we make payments through the Treasury or through the Ministry of Finance, whichever, does that money go through the central bank, or is there another system that just takes money wherever it's supposed to go?
It's supposed to go through central bank.
Okay.
The law is clear. We
Yes.
have one account called the Exchequer account.
Yeah, okay.
That is what everything is voted on,
Okay.
both development and recurrent.
Yeah.
So it goes through central bank.
Bank. So
those payments of 5.6,
there's a record of them in the central bank as them having been paid,
they should be.
but they're not there.
Well, why are we still owing in March last year 8.4? And yet, Parliament has passed
5
repayments of 5.6 over the term. Not only passed, with interest.
That's what I'm hearing.
So we have been paying our debt. No, nobody has said we have not paid our debt because we have not defaulted. So we've been paying it. But why is it not being reflected on the accounts
So is
of
it
central
possible
bank?
that the debt was actually 14 trillion?
No, this is the point I'm trying to make. That this is the $1 million question.
It's a $1 trillion question, really. Yeah, because
We have been paying. In fact, if you look at 5.6, we didn't even need to take Uhuru's 6 trillion debt. We could have financed our own development.
if we were able to pay 5.6 trillion.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were
stands
able to, we
reason.
didn't need to take that.
So you're saying that when Parliament passes this particular process that enables us to pay, does it therefore mean that once they pass it, it means we have paid?
Yes. Once they pass it, it is passing recurrent expenditure for the exchequer to pay. And it means that they have collected the revenue in taxation to pay.
Okay, you've answered the question
Yes.
I was going to ask.
Recurrent is taxation. Only.
So it exists.
It exists.
So when you're paying, you're paying from something which exists.
Yes. And there's never any year that Kenya Revenue has not said they've not collected the taxation as estimated.
So what does this mean, Jimmy? Because, okay, if we go through this now, chronologically, what you said. So debt was at this amount over a number of years. There's been, successive payments of this debt because, like you said, nobody has said there's been a default. So debt must have been paid. Where we are now, according to what you're saying, is that money has gone out. It does not reflect on government books. Government books now being coming from Treasury, Central Bank, where
Yes.
money is supposed to be.
Correct.
Now, what would be the reason why you pay a debt and it doesn't show up as a debit on the account? Why would that be?
This is, as CT was saying, the $1 trillion question. We have a problem in this country that is beyond your imagination or mine. That's really what I'm saying. But I want to be very basic. Because this is something we cannot and nobody can explain to us. When I came out with this report, there was no reaction from government. And I made sure I did it before the regime of Uhuru left power. It was on purpose. It was strategic. It was not about the election. It was strategic. I gave them a chance to answer. They never answered. Up to now, even the current regime has not answered this. I want to tell you something. We as Kenyans are not liable for this debt. And we should not be made liable for this debt. It is an odious debt. And I want to tell you, it is coming to strangle us, and we must decide today, urgently, what we are going to do as Kenyans about this.
What are
It is a total and absolute mess.
What are the options?
I'll give you an example of Mozambique. In Mozambique, I'm sure you've heard of the famous tuna bond
Yep.
scandal.
Yep.
Now, the tuna bond was about a $2 billion loan from 3 entities, so-called to help their tuna fishing.
It's forward-thinking and forward-looking.
Forward-looking and so on and so forth.
Help the people.
Now, what eventually happened is that what was passed by Parliament, and Parliament knew, was about half that amount. Eventually, the other amount of 1 billion also got to be found out that it didn't go towards fish, it went to military and went to other things. In 2019, Mozambicans went to the Constitutional Court and they got an order from the Constitutional Court that declared that debt an odious debt. From that being declared an odious debt, it led to the incarceration of very many people that were involved in getting that debt, including the former Minister of Finance, who had fled to South Africa, other parties that had gone to America, the people who were part of organizing this from
Financial
various institutions, led to their arrest. Okay? And up until today, Mozambicans have never paid that debt. There was a cost, though. There was a cost. Their currency depreciated. Their credit rating went down. But you know what they said? It was going down anyway. They were headed for default anyway. What they have starved their country of is the fact that it has personally not hit them, like the seizures of your bank accounts, out of debt default. That situation still exists today. That order, that money has never been paid since 2019. No repayments.
If you look at that example,
And IMF still has a program, right? In fact, they led the onslaught on the theft with Mozambique. They never cut off relations. So we have got to decide what is the better evil. You can accept that your bank account is seized by the government because you're the sovereign. Fine. If you are prepared
if you're okay
to
with
pay
it.
that cost, if you're okay with it, sawa. If you're prepared to make to your M-Pesa is no longer working the way you know it, sawa. You know, M-Pesa is transactions are 43% of GDP go through M-Pesa. If you didn't know, it's very high. So that is going to be a target. That will be a target. So
Unless
if
what
you are
happens-
prepared to go through this, well and
Or
good.
we go to a constitutional court like Mozambicans did
Yeah.
and object to this.
That is a
debt.
big option because
Okay.
ours is odious.
But then for this to happen, just like in Mozambique, there was a conspiracy. A conspiracy, like you're saying, it involved several officials. The treasury, their finance ministry was involved. And of course, some of the people in the lending organizations were involved. In this particular case of ours, if you just look at what you've said, then there'd be a very wide web of co-conspirators.
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Those are
Where is
very
our
many.
5.6? For example, where is our 5.6?
Those are
that we
very
paid?
many people, Jimmy, to keep a secret. And you don't even hear about it. There'll be officials in the National Treasury, in the National Debt Management Office, in the Central Bank of Kenya, in the Auditor General's office, in the Controller of Budget's office, in Parliament itself. There are many people, Bwana Jimmy.
Have you ever heard Parliament, ever, when they are making the repayments on their debt of 5.6 in recurrent, ever question how they only approved 2 trillion, but we are paying 5.6? It's the same Parliament that is approving repayments of 5.6. And they're the same one that passed only loans of 2 trillion. Don't you think we have a problem here?
Okay. Who will bail the cat? Is Jimmy Wanjigi prepared to take
That's
this
what I've
matter
been
up to
doing.
court?
That's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing.
Are you going to court?
Uh,
Are you looking for other like-minded people to join
I think
you?
the greatest court
Yeah.
is the People's Court.
For them to understand.
Yes.
And for them, but then
That is the greatest court.
But then the judiciary did like what it did in Mozambique. It gives it the power of the law.
I can assure you, when the People's Court has understood it, the people will take up those decisions of going to the judiciary, as you're saying, or to any other place. They could even go on the streets.
Are you doing a second follow-up now to this?
Oh,
Because
yes.
this, you looked at the paper. Have you done a paper trail, or a money trail, where if you went and Kenyans asked you, so we are not paying up to this level, who should we hold accountable for that? Will you be able to give us names and tell us?
No.
These are the ones.
You see, this thing is so simple. Yeah? Our laws and our constitution are very clear about freedom of information. I have got part 2 to this. But the minute we accept that this is the reality, the government has got to bring all its books here.
And
Where did the 5.6 go? That we have repaid. That is our money. Please tell me what this 4 trillion above, what did it go to borrow for? See, to be brought right into our table.
You know, Jimmy, what you're saying, simple as it sounds, and it does sound simple, has a complexity woven into it. And the complexity, as Eric was intimating, is it involves more than just the government, the Ministry of Finance, Exchequer, Central Bank, because the same thinking and the same problems you're talking about can be transferred to our devolved units immediately. Because similar thinking that leads to it is mirrored with great clarity. Anyway, Eric.
We wait for part 2, Jimmy, right? With bated breath. And as you go around the country then creating awareness about this, we also want to see what are you proposing as a next step for Kenyans to do? What is it that what tools are available for Kenyans to make sure that they safeguard themselves from a Ghana situation? But thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. Jimmy Wanjigi, politician, businessman, has been our guest this morning. He authored a book called The Kenya Public Debt Heists, and it's all available. I can see it. He says, there's all this debt that we are told that we owe. We actually don't owe this debt. Keep it here for more conversation.